When leaves are changing colors and the temperatures are dropping outside, everyone is looking for wines that will warm you up. Whether you are sitting by the fire or just enjoying fall flavors of the season in your kitchen, there's some amazing wines that you definitely have to check out. And today on the Wine CEO podcast, I'm talking to Morgan Beck, winemaker at Johan Vineyards, about some amazing wines that she recommends for this fall season. Hi friends, my name is Sarah and I'm a certified sommelier and host of the Wine CEO podcast. And every week on this show, we dive into fun and relatable wine topics. Thanks for joining us today as I'm interviewing a winemaker, talking about a topic of the season, and hopefully you'll pick up some amazing tips and tricks about great wines that you want to bring onto your dinner table this Thanksgiving and all fall long. Well, hi, Wine CEO podcast listeners. I am so excited because today on the show, I have Morgan Beck, and Morgan is the winemaker at Johan Vineyards in Willamette Valley, Oregon. And I've been really excited to interview Morgan because not only does she have a really elaborate and diverse portfolio of wines, including some skin fermented white wines that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but she has some really delicious options that I think are perfect for every Thanksgiving table. So really excited to welcome Morgan to the show today to talk a little bit more about the winery, the practices of what you're doing at Johan, and really what it's like to just be in the Willamette Valley as well. So Morgan, welcome so much to the Wine CEO podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, so excited to have you here. And what I'd love, if you wouldn't mind, is if you could just first tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and really how you got into this fun career of winemaking.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like I'm with a lot of people in that it wasn't our initial career path. I actually started in finance and international business and found myself very quickly burnt out on that kind of career path, and then transitioned into hospitality and restaurants, and had the opportunity to begin tasting and learning about wine through the lens of hospitality. Um, I grew up in Colorado, so far away from wine country. They do make some wine in Colorado, I will say that, but far away from Oregon and I guess the West Coast wine country. But lots of tourism and definitely restaurant scene. I worked up in the mountains in Vail, Colorado, and had the opportunity to begin kind of tasting and helping organize wine programs. This piqued my interest into continuing down the wine education path. I then, I guess, the jump from hospitality to production really just landed in the desire to learn more about the source, and get closer to understanding the hows and the whys of how things, I guess, really happen and come about to be this beautiful finished product. So I did a small certificate program, an enology and viticulture certificate program down in Argentina, actually. And from there applied for a bunch of internships and was lucky to land one and then get to bounce between hemispheres for many years to, I guess, chase Pinot Noir around the globe for a little bit. And one of those hops happened to be in Oregon. So that was my also introduction to Oregon. So that's kind of, I guess, my initial wine career path.
Very cool. That's amazing. And so it sounds like Pinot Noir has kind of become your heart. This is your, specialty, which you're in the perfect place for that, right? In Willamette Valley, which is amazing. Can you tell us a bit about the winery you're working at? So you're working at Johan Vineyard, and what brought you specifically to this winery?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess in 2015, I had a harvest experience that we were a custom crush facility that worked with and made multiple different brands, 3 different brands. And they were a client or a great buyer of Johan Vineyard. So something unique about Johan is that we do have a pretty large amount of acreage planted, but we operate as an estate winery, but then sell a good amount of fruit to quite a few great buyers and winery partners So I was on that end, and I got to experience the Johan fruit at a different facility. The winemaker one day was taking back some picking bins, I think, and came back with some wines in paper bags. We didn't know where he had been, but he blinded us on both a Chardonnay and a Pinot Noir from Johan, and the Chardonnay just totally blew my socks off. I did not place it as a domestic Chardonnay. He pulled it out of the bag, and I thought, I need to go talk to these people. So I found out that they were actually looking for a part-time tasting room person, and the winemaker I was working with said they need some more help. And within my first week, I was helping top barrels and kind of get the rest of the vintage put down to barrel, and kind of quickly immersed myself in all things Johan just after the 2015 vintage. Oregon, I think of it as the Willamette Valley is a pretty large, AVA, and there are multiple sub AVAs within that AVA. We are in the Van Duzer Corridor AVA, and it is a place that is definitely one of the coolest, if not possibly the coldest, spot in the valley. We are directly in the mouth, like right in front of the main east-west gap that goes out to the ocean. So as the valley heats up, it creates this heat sink and pulls all of the cold wind and cold air in from the ocean, and it kind of comes rushing in through this channel, or the Van Duzer corridor, hits the Eola Amity hillside, and then spreads out east-west to act as the cooling effect for the whole valley. So we're right at that mouth, and we have pretty windy afternoons in the summer. It really helps with keeping nice acidity during the ripening period, in those final stages of ripening specifically. We're able to elongate our time on the vine and have really nice mature phenolics in the skins as well as the stems, and then still retain beautiful natural acidity even in some of those warmer years where it's becoming harder and harder with climate change to make a nice balanced Pinot Noir without adjustment. That's one of the main things, I guess, that's a desire of ours, is to make wines in a true kind of translation of what the year gave us. So we are not adding any cultivated yeast or bacteria, and we are not adjusting acidity, sugar, or potential alcohol, let alone like finding filtration or any other additives to the wine. We do add a small amount of sulfur at the kind of precise moments within the wine's life to keep it alive and fresh, but it's a very small amount. So we're trying to just really, I guess, make wine in a clear, kind of pure representation of that vintage and all of the people and the climate that was involved in that growing season, I guess.
So would you classify your wines as being natural wines because you're using, low intervention, low sulfur, native yeast?
That's a good question. Natural wines, of course, is that one of those terms that these days there is no clear definition of a natural wine. Many people would say that a truly natural wine is nothing added, nothing taken away. So no additives whatsoever, even sulfur, as well as no finding filtration or any things removed from the winemaking process. So kind of the diehard natural wine scene, we do add sulfur, not to all of our wines. We make quite a few wines without any sulfur that I feel are either, super fresh, quick to market, like don't need that protection of sulfur. But I do feel that some of the best expressions from this vineyard and from this site are ones that are either meant to age, or I age them in barrel for quite some time. And I think that that's when we have some really complex flavor profiles as well as complex expressions from this site. So I am fine with adding a small amount of sulfur for that to be able to be alive and well for a long time for people to enjoy. So I would say that we maybe aren't a completely natural winery, but we do focus on lower intervention methods for winemaking.
Awesome. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying. That's perfect. And
yeah,
I know another thing that you all really focus on is the commitment to sustainability. So biodynamic practices, you mentioned organic and biodynamic a minute ago, as well as regenerative farming. So can you talk to us a little bit about that commitment? I know you have an animal husbandry program. So walk us through kind of just the overall commitment towards sustainability at Johan.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of mentioned the original timeline there was this all began in 2007. The vines were established conventionally originally. And then in 2007, we started that conversion to organic and biodynamic farming with the certification coming through in 2010. And that certification is both in the vineyard as well as the winery. So our wines are certified biodynamic wines, and that our facility is certified. And our inspection of the vineyard also carries over into the winery and the winemaking process. Um, so we've been farming biodynamic for quite some time now. Of course, that transition, which was prior to my time here, but that transition does take time. Um, Dan was a big, um, he had a lot of knowledge of biodynamic farming, a really, really great teacher and mentor for everyone here to learn about that process. I think of biodynamics, so I guess I'll start with organics. Organics really regulates the products that you are allowed to use in your farming practices. So instead of using a specific fungicide, there is a swap to an organic certified fungicide. Um, so it's really just like a product swap. And of course, those products are great to use and to think about, but it doesn't think about the property in a holistic sense. Biodynamics thinks about the entire property, everything within our fence line as being one system. So it's taking that kind of more specific and detailed farming practice and thinking of it on a much broader scale. We're thinking about all of our outputs, like our pumice and our stems and everything going back into the system, into a compost system and being reapplied as nutrients for the next season. We're thinking about the long-term soil health and how to create the most healthy and kind of resilient soils and therefore resilient perennial crops that we are growing. Regenerative farming is a newer term, but is, I think, age-old philosophies. It really focuses on the I guess soil health and coverage. I think of regenerative practices really thinking about how to have complete cover in the vineyard. So we have a perennial cover crop that we do not till our property anymore. We don't till in vine or in rows at all under vine. And we let that perennial cover crop kind of dominate the in-between row. Another big principle of regenerative agriculture is the animal husbandry program. We started that in 2019 with some chickens initially, and then slowly started with our first 10 sheep, and that has now grown. We had our first lambing season of our own last year. We have just over 30 sheep that move through the entire vineyard during the winter months when there is no fruit on the vine. They're acting as kind of living lawnmowers and of course, returning the nutrients to the soil through their manure, kind of giving a nice light till to the top of the soil layer. And then we have our chickens we used to follow them with our chickens, and now we have them together. So they're kind of working with each, um, with 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 each other in each movement. And our vineyard manager, Nathan, has really learned a ton in the last few years of how to move them, how to operate an intensive grazing program. It takes a lot of work, and we're moving the animals 2 and sometimes 3 times in 1 week to make sure that they're not eating too much of one thing, or eating too little, and moving on before they've done a good job in the area. So um, it's really cool. I think something that's been super fulfilling, at least for me, having been here for 8 years now, just to see a property that I was like beginning to feel pretty comfortable with, through this new lens of having animals on the property. And you see what things they choose to eat, and you see what weeds grow in different blocks, and you just like think about everything so differently because they've shown this light on something that maybe we became a little bit complacent about and just kind of glance over because you have so many things on your plate every day. And I know Nathan's really enjoyed that too. He's an incredible farmer with a lot of experience and history in grape growing, and the animal program has been just a really big interest of his, and he has really taken it to the next level with kind of figuring out how to do it all, and he does it with like 1.5 people. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
I love hearing that. I think, I mean, just the overall commitment to the health in general, to the land that you have, the soil, the crops. I think it's really cool to see the commitment. I've interviewed a lot of winemakers in a lot of different regions of the world, and I think there can be a hesitancy for some to move towards some of these more regenerative practices because it can be expensive, it can be a little unpredictable. And in your first couple of years, it can be really, really hard. And so it's great that you've been able to see in the last 8 years that you've been there, how this commitment has had such a positive impact on the land, on the fruit that you're getting. I think it's a really cool thing to be able to speak to. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Is this something that you are seeing more of in other wineries in the Willamette Valley region? Do you feel like this is something that's unique to Johan at the moment? Do you see others wanting to commit to these types of changes?
I do. Yeah, I think Oregon in general has definitely a pretty good history of an incredible biodynamic presence. Some of the older biodynamic farmers that I saw as kind of people I wanted to work with across the country, are all located here in Oregon. And then, you know, every year I'm really impressed to see more and more farmers who have been doing things a very set way that works, right? That works for them, become interested. And whether that's because one of their grape buyers says, hey, this is really important to me. I really would love for you to consider not using Roundup under vine anymore. I really would love for you to consider to not till this property anymore. We have people come out that I would have never thought that their scope would be open to this, integrating at least one of these practices into their farming philosophy. And it's really inspiring to see more and more people take the leap. And whether it's a leap or like small steps, I think all of it is a great way to achieve just a healthier, system. And the whole agriculture industry really needs to to step it up. And we have a limited amount of time to fix what we've done. So I think any work towards that goal is a win. And yeah, I think every year we're seeing more and more, and it's really incredible.
That's awesome. I love hearing the perspective. And I
hope you're right that we see more folks in the agriculture industry moving in that direction. I think it's been really exciting to see more wineries making that leap and taking that step. And what I hear from many of them is that they're surprised on the other end that, you know what, it actually wasn't as hard as they thought it was going to be. And it's been a more long-term positive change for them in the quality of their wines and the quality of the fruit. And so it ends up being a really positive thing. And I think every region of the world is different, right? And I've heard some winemakers talk about how, depending on the unique climate in their area or the unique pests that they might have, that can make it more challenging for them compared to other regions of the world. But to your point, I like hearing about new folks trying it all the time. So it's good to see the positive changes, definitely. I'm curious. So you have a pretty large scope of grapes. You have a large portfolio. So first of all, how many acres do you have at Johan? And then how many barrels are you producing, or tons, whatever's the easiest for you to describe to us, because you sell a lot of the grapes. So let us know the scope of the property and then what you're producing as a winery as well.
Sure. Yeah. So we have, at this point, we have 15 different grape varieties growing commercially. We have a couple others in small amounts, but so the whole property here is 175 acres, and we have 87 under vine. So that's right around half of the acreage under vine. That creates that wonderful kind of balance to be able to have the animals in the producing acreage in the winter months, and then we move them out of the vineyard and into our headlands. So we have a lot of oak savanna that we're maintaining the understory and preserving the native Oregon white oak. So lots of big oak trees on the property. And we're moving the animals through these nice shaded areas in the summer. So that works really, really well. In terms of the different varieties, so this property originally was 63 acres of Dijon Pinot Noir, Dijon Chardonnay, and a little bit of Pinot Gris. And in 2009, we were able to add that additional acreage to bring in some of the higher acid kind of heirloom clones and selections of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And that kind of opened up the idea to Dan and Dog to begin kind of cutting down these really big blocks of Dijon Pinot that they were realizing in riper and warmer years were harder and harder to maintain balance. They had the opportunity to work with a few winery partners back in the early days of some of the grafting projects who had specific requests that they would like to work with. But also Dan and Dog were just tasting around the world and kind of wondering like, oh, this region is pretty dang close in terms of climate to Oregon. Do you think we can grow Austrian grapes here in Oregon? Do you think we can do, can we ripen Cab Franc? We don't know. Let's try a small amount at first. And if it works, we grow on it. So that's kind of how that originally started. We introduced the Gamay, Cab Franc, and Malone, and some of the Austrians, so the Blaufränkisch, Gruner Veltliner, and from there continue to grow. We have some of the northern Italian grapes, the Ribolla Gialla and Friulano. We have Mondouse, Kerner, Zweigelt, Saint Laurent, Cab Franc. Yeah, I can't normally list them all at this kind of point. But yeah, there are quite a few, and I'm really happy to say that as of this year, Johan is officially working with all 15. So we had sold some of the other varieties, and I slowly have said, well, I really want to try working with that. And so we have at least one fermenter of every grape variety out there at this point.
Very cool. And
pretty exciting.
Would you say you're looking to try and do more single varietals to find the representation of these grapes in the Willamette terroir? Are you looking to do blends of these? What's kind of your hope moving forward? Because it's a pretty big portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. And in reality, we make just over 20 wines right now. And every year I'm like, we should not make a new wine. We should focus on these. And um, as we were continuing to expand the offerings, I came up with the idea to make a red and a white blend. So the white blend it's a skin contact white blend so that we can work with all these really fun white varieties that we're finding are really cool when you ferment them on skins. And we have this wine called Maceration that is a blend, and it allows this really wonderful creative space to be able to work with the different varieties, and we don't have to decide what they are in advance. That blend can be different every year. And then same on the red front. So we have a red blend called Murmuration, and that originally I thought that it would be an Austrian inspired, and then the Cab Franc has gone into it the last few years because it just has made it really, really delicious. And potentially in time we'll make a Cab Franc on its own, but yeah, we have these blending spaces, as well as when I feel like a single variety, like we've kind of figured it out, or that expression has worked for the year, we will not hesitate to go ahead and make a single varietal wine of that variety.
That's awesome. One of the varieties that you didn't mention is the Sauvignon. And I'm curious if you could share the story about that, because it sounds like there's kind of a cool history. This was like your baby pet project from 2017. So tell us about how you acquired these grapes and how that became a part of the portfolio.
Yeah. So the Sauvignon came in through, there was not any up here in Oregon, and very little planted in the US. Um, we, so a winemaker friend who was really passionate about bringing this variety to Oregon got in touch with FPS, the Foundation of Plant Sciences, down in California, based out of the UC Berkeley campus, and was able to get these tiny little vines. So it's called meristem propagation, in that you're taking the very tip of the vine and you're growing that in a lab to kind of outgrow any virus or potentially bad things when you're introducing it to a new area. So they came to me, and this winemaker came and said, hey, can you care for these? You guys have a vineyard, and I had a little garden at the time. And of course, 2017 was like this pretty difficult winter where it was cold, and I wanted to make sure they stayed dormant but not frozen. And so I would move them in and outside to try and keep them alive. They came in these little tiny 4x4 pots, and I transplanted them for 3 years and finally got them big enough to be able to harvest the budwood and graft them into the vineyard. Grafting is this wonderful way of introducing a new variety to a vineyard, and that you literally cut the vine and you leave the bottom, so you leave the roots in place. So it's this very happy root system below, and you can cut the top of the plant off. And there's a highly skilled team of individuals who travel up and down the West Coast every spring, and they come and graft your vines for you. But you put 2 bud sticks. So basically, in order to use the wood from these original vines that I got, we had to get pencil diameter, so pretty, decently thick in comparison to what they came as. And then you have to have 2 inches in between each node, in between each little bud node. So once the plants were mature enough to be able to produce the correct diameter, as well as that space in between nodes, I was able to harvest a really small amount to graft in. I think it was like 0.12 acres. It was like a row and a quarter the first year in 2019. And then we were able to take the wood from those vines and expand the block in 2020. So it's been a long road to be able to get these vines into production, and then of course be able to make the wine from them. Our first vintage of making a true Sauvignon was 2021, and we just released it this fall. So it feels like a big accomplishment, and also really exciting. The label is directs. It's a watercolor piece from our wonderful label artist Johan. He took a picture that I had taken when I finally realized that the budwood was big enough with the correct node spacing, and it was this beautiful blue skied day with like the perfect, little poofy clouds in the background, and took this picture, which meant a lot to me at the time, and of course also happens to make a really beautiful label piece for it. But the Sauvignon's really fun. I think also has a special place for a lot of us here because we love our Chardonnay on this property so much. The Sauvignon has some similarities to Chardonnay, but it has just kind of a different dimension in terms of both minerality and the acidity. The acid profile is incredible. So we're able to get nice ripe fruit, but also beautiful acidity from this grape. And I think it's a really great option for Oregon climate and Oregon terroir, as we're looking at a warming climate, and it's a battle to keep nice balanced acids in this warming climate.
Very cool. That's awesome. I love the story. And again, what an exciting thing to be at the forefront of bringing a variety to a region. And I appreciate you explaining the work that went into keeping these little small buds alive and then getting them grafted into the vineyard. It's cool to hear about the whole process, and impressive that really from the point that you received the plants until being able to make the first crop, it was only 4 years. So 4 long years that you had to put a lot of work and effort into it, but not too long. So that's awesome. Very cool. Another wine that I'd love if you could talk to our listeners about is the Pinot Gris that has extended contact with skin. So some might call it like an orange style white wine when you do extended skin contact. Tell us about your process behind this Pinot Gris, what makes you excited about it, and why it's maybe a unique one to feature.
Yeah. So this wine for us, it's called Druskal. Druskal means grape skin in Norwegian, and the original owner, Dag Johan, he was from Norway. So we have some fun Norwegian names of our wines. So we have made this wine here at Johan since 2009. I'll say orange wine back in 2009, at least domestically, was definitely a new thing and was quite difficult to sell. Even when I came on in 2015, we had wine club members sending back their Pinot Gris saying, something's wrong with this. Like, what has happened? I think we got a mixed up bottle, or, and we explained, no, actually, Pinot Gris, of course, we most often see this as a white wine, but the skins of this grape are actually, gris means gray in French, but they're like, I'd describe them as like dark pink or light purple in color. And traditionally, we put this grape into the press and press it and remove it from the skins, and therefore just ferment the juice away from the skins. And that's what makes it a white wine. We really, really enjoy the skin contact version, and we actually no longer make a white version of the Pinot Gris. Everything that we make is now this skin contact version. It is, of the Pinot family, so it's a highly aromatic grape, and all of those aromatics, as well as tannin and structure compounds, live in the skins. So I always kind of think of it as like, we're doing this a disservice and removing it from the like most magical part of the grape. and the potential of the winemaking process. So we have had quite a few years to play with it and have really found the kind of balance of how much and how to, or how long, I guess, and how to extract from the skins. We do a couple of fermentations that we treat just like our red wines. So one is a completely destemmed, so we remove all the stems and have it just the berries, whole berry fermented. We punch it down 2 times a day just with our feet, and just as we do all of our other wines. We also do a whole cluster fermentation, and then we Dan, the original wine grower, had done this for a while prior to me starting, but he really felt that the carbonic maceration, so these are whole clusters put into a tank and sealed up. So it's a completely anaerobic environment, and that kind of actually goes through this little enzymatic reaction inside the berry. So they're completely intact clusters that have this very different fermentation that I think make this beautiful aromatic kind of component to the whole blend. All of these pieces, I guess, are aged separately, and then they come back together at just before the year mark when we bring them to bottle. And, you know, this wine on our label, the label for it has these beautiful orange mushrooms that actually, like this time of year is Druskal season. For me, the orange mushrooms grow on like all of the pruning cuttings and the woody parts of the vine that are in row that get decomposed over the fall and winter season. So these little orange mushrooms pop with the first rains of the season, and you have this kind of dreary Oregon landscape with these like bright orange mushrooms in row. And of course, mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of the mycelial network below the soil. So it means that you have a healthy soil structure below. But I find this wine to be, you have the beautiful kind of components of fruit that you would in the white wine version, but also this like earthy kind of dried leaf. I also think of like roasted squash and like, yeah, earth driven parts of the wine, as well as this beautiful structure. So it really can, for me, this is like the Thanksgiving wine, that can sit on a table and kind of dance with all the things on the plate that would normally hit well with a white wine, but then also like stand up to some turkey and gravy and like, maybe some heavier parts of that crazy mix of things that you put all on one plate and have at least 8 different things on one bite.
It sounds like the perfect fall wine, honestly, which is so funny because I think usually folks would maybe go for a red in the fall, or they might look for even a Chardonnay, something that typically they might be familiar with having more body, more structure. You wouldn't always reach for a Pinot Gris, but in this instance, this style is going to have a lot of those heavier structure kind of characteristics. And you mentioned having even more tannin and more of the earthy characteristics, and that makes it just perfect pairing with pumpkin, squash, like you said, right? A lot of really great fall flavors. And it makes it a great wine for the fall time and for Thanksgiving. So it sounds absolutely delicious, and a style that I think a lot of folks may not be familiar with, but a fun one to try out, especially if you're looking for something new to try this fall season. An extended skin contact Pinot Gris could be a fun one. So since you mentioned Thanksgiving, any other wines in your portfolio that you feel would be awesome pairing with turkey dinner and all the fixings?
Well, it's not just because we're in Pinot country, but traditionally, I think a lot of people really think that Pinot Noir is the perfect pairing for a Thanksgiving table, or if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, just like the fall cuisine. And so for me, we make a few different Pinot Noirs here, but there's one that is that we just released this fall, and I'm just thrilled with how it's drinking right now, and I'm really excited to enjoy it with a lot of the fall dishes that are ahead of us once we get done with this wild harvest. But this is the only clone or selection isolation, I guess, that we do of Pinot Noir. I normally feel that the best Pinot expression is one that has a lot of diversity in terms of different clones, different blocks and aspects, and kind of all the pieces that we have here at this really kind of diverse site that I am so fortunate to get to work with. But this one wine, was it back in 2017? I was like, we cannot blend this away. This is just, it's too pretty and it needs to be on its own this year. And so I made a wine that year called Vineyard Selection. And I thought, okay, well, every year I'll find a different clone or a different block or something to isolate and put into this Vineyard Selection wine. And 3 years in a row, it was the Mariah Feld clone or selection, this one block that we have. And this clone came in, it's a Swiss clone, so from Switzerland, and a selection that was made in Switzerland. It came in through the Wädenswil nursery. If anyone's familiar with Wädenswil as a Pinot Noir clone, that is also from Switzerland. But it's just a completely different animal. It doesn't look like Pinot Noir on the vine. It has these very round berries with really open and loose clusters. Pinot, Pinot means like pine cone. That's what they kind of named Pinot after, meaning that they're like these pine cones, like really tight little fists of clusters. And Mariah Feld is the complete opposite of that. It's like loose and dangly. It almost somewhat resembles Syrah. And it has very thick skins, a lot of color, and a lot of tannin, as well as beautiful acidity. So it's the last thing that we pick in the Pinot realm, and has just really beautiful acid, as well as plenty of structure and fruit and spice. It's kind of like has all of these components of the best potential for aging, that being acid, structure, fruit, all in one. So we isolated it and have made it as a single variety or a single clonal selection since 2017. And we just released the 2019. So we keep it in barrel for around 19 months. So it's held a bit longer. And then it goes to bottle and then is also cellared for some time before release. So the 19 is gorgeous. And I think it's a great pairing for Thanksgiving.
It sounds delicious. You have me very excited to have Thanksgiving here with all this talk of delicious wine and delicious food. That sounds like it'd be the perfect thing on any Thanksgiving table, and even something to just enjoy all fall long. So I love the focus on that specific clonal selection. So that's sounds like an amazing wine. I'll include all of the info for the winery in the show notes for today's episode so that folks that are traveling to the area can come check it out. Or those who just want to learn more can go to the website and see what you all are up to and follow along as you have these exciting changes coming in the near future. So Morgan, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It was just such a pleasure talking to you and learning more about Johan Winery. So thanks for coming on the Wine CEO podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode and my conversation with Morgan Beck. Whether you live in a climate that has beautiful fall weather coming your way or somewhere where you're just trying to enjoy the flavors of the season, I hope today's episode gave you some tips on some wines that you can check out for Thanksgiving and for the whole season long. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to like and share this episode with a friend. Subscribe to the Wine CEO podcast channel if you haven't yet here on YouTube so you don't miss any upcoming amazing wine content. I have lots coming up for the holiday season. My upcoming favorite episode is the holiday gift guide. It's also a very popular episode with all of the listeners every year. So that's coming up soon, as well as a lot of other great content for the holidays. You don't want to miss it. If you have any questions about this episode or wine in general, don't hesitate to send me an email, sarah@thewineCEO.com, and you can also check me out on social as well, linked in the description below. Until next week, I hope you have a wonderful week, try something new and delicious, and I will catch you all next Wednesday on the Wine CEO podcast.